Welcome back to OtakuDaiKun. Dai here. So, I was browsing my own personal YouTube account, often watching memes or Drumsy, Let's Game It Out, that kind of thing. But then I came across this video from MoistCr1TiKaL titled, "The Thing I Hate About Anime," and my heart sank just a bit. I had a feeling I knew exactly what he was going to be complaining about from the very beginning, and I was right. Well, mostly. Since Moist is such a massive content creator, getting millions of views on his vids within a day, I worry sometimes that certain influencers wind up influencing people too much. Obviously, I'm nowhere near his channel size, but I did start this channel in part so that I could have a voice in the world about the fandom I most enjoy, anime. Thus, for today, I want to do something simple and react to Moist's video. Given the vast majority of his content is watching other people's videos and reacting to them, I figured he'd be a safe subject to do my own reaction, you know, from a fair use perspective and all. Believe it or not, I found myself watching a lot of his videos prior to this, so this isn't coming from a place of hostility, not at all. My goal isn't to oppose what he thinks at all times, but to treat this as a debate between his video, me, and you guys watching. Alright, enough beating around the bush. Let's get started.
For the first time in the 15 years I've been on YouTube, it's a video that I've actually been afraid to make because it's a dangerous topic. It's touchy. It's anime. And anime fans can get wild.
Anime fans can get wild. That's an understatement for sure. That said, I think big fandoms like that can always get crazy. Being a fan myself, it's easy to look at other people and go, oh, but I'm not like those kinds of fans. Because yeah, being a fan of something doesn't mean you agree with all of the other fans. We're not all on the same team just because we have something in common. When I was at an anime convention, my wife, my brother, and I went out to eat at a Hard Rock cafe. One of the other groups next to us, cosplaying as Monster Musume, frickin' pulled a dine and dash with their server. Pisses me off, because it makes the rest of us look bad. So yeah, in general, I'm reluctant to take the phrase anime fans are blank very seriously.
I also recently learned about antimatter, and it's the only thing in the universe that releases 100% of its energy in like this devastating explosion. And that's also wrong, because weebs do that too when they find out that you don't like their favorite waifu.
That's kind of funny. With the exception of Fate, some of my all-time favorite waifu are on the bottom end of my holy waifu wars. I can't say I've ever gotten in a personal, emotional battle about waifu with someone, unless they were trying to get it censored.
The point I'm making is, things can get very ugly when you criticize or talk about anime negatively. Expect an unholy, diabolical meltdown on Twitter attacking you for weeks for it.
Ironically, Twitter is usually where people go to give negative opinions on anime. Let's be honest, Twitter's greatest use is for showing off and networking with awesome anime artists. That or showing trailers and announcements for upcoming stuff. If I have to actually write a post or reply on Twitter, that usually means something's gone wrong. In 9 out of 10 times, it's because someone's trying to call me a child lover or a misogynist for liking the stuff I like. And I'm not even a lolicon.
I still, to this day, have not heard the end of how wrong I am for not liking JoJo's Part 3 and 4 as much as I liked Parts 1 and 2. And I mentioned that a single time in a video over a year ago.
I personally can't stand JoJo's art style. I think it and One Piece are both ugly. Plus, I don't like most shonen. Just don't come to me if you want coverage on that kind of thing. That's neither here nor there though, since my opinion doesn't have to dictate your own.
I'm sure all of you know by now, but I watch a lot of anime. You could probably guess that just by taking a single glance at me. If I walk by you in public, you would probably assume that I watched anime just by the way I look.
I actually hate the idea that you could identify an anime fan on sight like that. Is it the beard, the long hair? Aren't those more hippie things than weeb things? It's like those generic otaku they always show at a comiket in anime. You've probably seen them before. Nah, I wouldn't immediately see Moist as a kindred anime fan unless he got some cool merch or a wall scroll or something. The only reason I know he watches anime is because he made a video about how devastatingly bad the second season of Promised Neverland was, and I was glad to see that he and I both thought that could have been handled so much better.
But the thing is, no matter how much anime I watch, there is one thing that always makes me uncomfortable with how common it is in the medium, and you probably already know what I'm going to bring up.
I do.
It's anime's fixation on making all of the characters kids or very kid-like for no reason.
Yep, here we go again.
Now, I'm not specifically talking about lollies. I'm sure you know what lollies are. If you don't, all power to you. Your innocence is intact. But I'll go ahead and ruin Christmas for you. Lollies are an anime where they have a character that looks like a child, but is actually a 4,000-year-old dragon cum vampire who's highly sexualized but looks like a child. They're called lollies. They're not actually children because in the show they're supposed to be much older, but they look like kids.
Technically, that's just the definition of a legal loli. Anime has its share of characters that look like and actually are kids, but the term is rather vague, so let's continue.
That shit's always gonna be weird to me, but it's not even exactly what I'm focusing on here. I'm talking about in the shows where they just actually outright make them children. For example, Tokyo Revengers. It's a show I really like. It's a show I moist-metered recently. The first season wrapped up. I gave it like a 90%. I thought the show was fantastic. But in the show, all of the characters are middle schoolers. And it does nothing for the plot because they're middle schoolers, but you never see their parents. Their schools don't have any effect on the plot at all. Sometimes they'll be in school, but they immediately leave, so it's not like integral to the plot at all. It just makes it really weird when they do adult shit, like one of the girls trying to fuck one of the guys, and she's in like her bra and panties about to have sex. It's weird because they've drilled into you that these are all middle schoolers around here.
Tokyo Revengers. I haven't seen that one. Let's take a look. Oh god, it's ugly. Definitely not my kind of anime. You're telling me this show has pretty girls? He must be talking about Emma Sano. An image of that exact scene comes right up, and true enough, her wiki page says she's 13 to 15 years old. Here's the catch though. If you gave me this picture without context, I'd say she looks like an attractive young woman. This ain't no little girl like, say, Hachikuji in Monogatari. You could easily swap Emma's school uniform out for like a business suit, and she'd fit in with other grown women. Since I'm the kind of guy who hears that Yoko is 14 here and calls bullshit, I can understand Moist's frustration. But for me, it's not that the characters look too young, it's that they're labeled as too young.
These could have very easily just been adults.
Agreed. In Gurren Lagann, for instance, Yoko has absolutely no narrative reason to be that young. In the time skip, she's 21, and there's hardly a difference.
If you took a tally of every single protagonist across every anime ever made, I'd wager about 85% of all main characters in anime are 15 years old.
Maybe. My guess would be 16, but neither of us have done the math. But here's the reason for that. School.
But it never plays a role in anything, them being kids. You know, it's not like that's ever an actual point in these shows, like, oh, fuck, I can't go to this gang fight because I have to go do my algebra homework, otherwise my parents are gonna spank me.
Honestly, that depends on the anime. Sometimes there is a reason, but it's a really silly one. Persona has a cast of high schoolers who are arguably doing way more important things for their world than attending class and getting good grades. Like in Persona 4, a little girl gets kidnapped, and we know if we wait too long, she'll die. But God forbid our main characters play hooky to save someone's life. Though, for the Phantom Thieves, they had to play as good students to avoid being found out, I guess. As if the first group the cops were looking for were delinquents.
The characters being children is always just so useless because they could have easily just been adults and it wouldn't have taken away from anything.
This I can agree with. Anime like Uzaki-chan or Rent-a-Girlfriend benefit from taking place in college. In the West, college is usually when we imagine young adults going wild, as it were. But that's definitely not how it is in Japan, and that's what we need to consider. Middle school and high school in Japan are very different than it is in the West. All those tropes you think about, from athletic field days, cultural festivals, summer fun, homework crunch, and club drama, are often considered to be the peak of youth for the Japanese. A time of fondness where they're discovering themselves and coming into their own. It's not just a critical time, it's the critical time for their youth. The vast majority of anime characters fall into this category because it's the main demographic. Even when it's marketed to adults, it's being marketed to them in remembrance and fantasy of those times, almost like a chance to relive those days. Thus, even if anime doesn't have anything to do with school, a lot of the same values will show up. Do they have to? No, but there's a very culturally significant reason why they're made this way.
And what really prompted me to make this video, or make me want to make this video over the last week or so, is I'm watching a currently airing anime called Platinum End, and it's dog shit. It is an actual pair of bull nuts. It's terrible. But I'm watching it because it's made by the creator of Death Note.
I actually just started watching Platinum End for the exact same reason. Let's just say it's no Death Note. It's not as careful or smart, but I still find it pretty interesting if you're into stuff like Future Diary.
One of the main bad guys is a kid. He's a middle schooler, and he has the ability to control the minds, basically, of anyone he shoots with an arrow, and he uses the arrow on a middle school girl. And she gets shot with this love arrow, and what she does is she just starts fucking other middle school girls. And they show her, like, almost fully nude, making out with middle school girls about to fuck them, finger blast them, go wild. It shows you that in the show.
At the time of writing this, I think I was just about to get to this episode in the anime. The girl he's referring to is Mimimi Yamada, or Misurin. When she was 14 years old, she was a model who was taken to a detention center after killing 2 girls her age. Now she's 16, being ordered by one of the main antagonists to kill, quote, ugly girls. It seems her sleeping with her own victims is of her own volition. I personally feel it's important to distinguish that she, the one instigating these things, is a high schooler. But yeah, her victims are middle school girls.
And it's super weird because they keep driving home this idea constantly that is a middle schooler. She is 13 or 14, whatever, years old. Even in the show, they call her the middle school serial killer because she's a middle schooler, and after she fucks the girls, she kills them.
She's considered the middle school killer because she killed people while she was in middle school. She's not a middle schooler anymore, though.
It's just super creepy because they are establishing that this is a child that we almost watch have sex with another child in the show.
I'm not here to say that this is good writing or whatever, but I can at least remind y'all that Platinum End is a pseudo-horror crime drama from the creator of Death Note. Moist says it's creepy, but that's the entire point. In an earlier episode, an elementary school girl nearly gets her arm ripped off trying to fly away from her attacker. The context of the story is that these god candidates are competing to become the next god, and they'll have the power to dictate the new world once they win. It's supposed to contrast characters of varying moral compasses. In Death Note, sure, there was a bit of a motive to root for Kira, because it made for a more interesting story, but the bad guys in Platinum End aren't as forgivable. The real issue, I don't think, is so much that there's a high schooler killing middle schoolers, but rather the fact that these acts are shown explicitly.
Now, of course, it's all cartoons. Sorry, can't use the C word here when talking about anime. People get very upset.
Semantics. Yeah, calling anime cartoons is an insult if it means you're underestimating its artistic integrity and maturity as a medium. That's not what Moist is doing here, though.
I understand they're not real kids or anything, but that doesn't make it any less creepy.
Again, I wish he'd bring up an example where the creepy stuff isn't being done by an obvious villain. The hard truth is that these scenes are shown explicitly because, for one, the viewers are presumed to be adults. This is one of those rare cases where the anime is meant for adult viewers, but still uses the middle school, high school setting for its nostalgia and familiarity. The other factor is that, while it's not encouraged necessarily, 14-year-olds in Japan being sexually active isn't that outrageous, especially not in this fictional context. At the very least, this anime presents it as a normal enough practice, in the sense that Mimimi was also a fashion model at age 14, and if you look at her now, she's drawn virtually indistinguishable from any other adult.
It could have just easily been avoided if these were adults, because they could have been. Again, in Platinum End, the school doesn't have any effect at all. The only thing the school has done is establish that the main character's been bullied. But he could have also just been an adult who had been bullied throughout his entire life in school. They could just be adults, and it wouldn't be weird. You could have adult characters instead of kids doing these adult things, these sexual things,
I agree that this anime doesn't need to be in school, but it still does make use of that fact. The main character was being abused by his guardians, so he couldn't confront them while that abuse was still happening if he'd already grown up and moved out. It's also part of his motive. He wants to live a normal school life, only ever using his angel powers to make that happen. The idea of having a peaceful, wholesome upbringing is a valuable commodity to him. Plus, one of the antagonists seems to be plotting his attacks from school as well. But yeah, if they really wanted to, they could have written it to all be about adults. Or at the very least make the serial killer and her victims adults. But again, that wouldn't be as creepy, would it?
Now, I'm not saying every single anime has to be like 40-year-old grizzled war veterans for characters or anything, but there's a lot of shows where them being kids is just a completely useless plot point, and because it doesn't actually play a role in the plot. Them being kids doesn't matter, like the two examples I just gave you. But then there are shows where it does matter that they're kids. Something like Assassination Classroom, right? They are kids in class. They're at school. The majority of that show takes place in a school setting.
I agree. Most of this comes down to Japan looking at a teenager and thinking, oh, they're already a teenager, wow. While the West is all like, oh my god, a teenager! Won't somebody please think of the children? When these anime artists set out to make their characters, they're not necessarily thinking, hooray, time to loot a kid. Instead, they draw what most of us see and appreciate, an attractive anime guy or girl, and then fit them into a story that, to their cultural standards, isn't all that obscene. I personally think most of the cultural tension would be averted if all these characters were just relabeled as 18 or older. That said, with people in Hollywood freaking out about how sexy Faye Valentine was in the original Bebop, I can't help but think those same Twitter enthusiasts would find something else to take issue with. For instance, in the game Tokyo Mirage Sessions, the English localization raised all the characters' ages to 18, and yet they still censored the flying fuck out of that game. Upping the age didn't really seem to help anything. So yeah, while it might make some people like MoistCr1TiKaL feel more comfortable to bump up their ages, I don't think that would inherently stop the outrage. We're better off just recognizing the cultural difference, and if it helps, aging the characters up in our own heads. I think it's reasonable to say that a Japanese 16-year-old is more akin to an American 18-year-old.
So obviously there's still a lot of shows where them being kids is actually important to the story and couldn't work with them being older. So I'm not saying everything in anime needs to be adults only. That's just called hentai, I suppose.
I don't mean to be that guy, but Assassination Classroom does have hentai. Then again, what doesn't?
I'm just saying there's a lot of shows where the characters are kids just because they wanted to make them children for no reason, but then they still want them to like fucking things, which makes it really uncomfortable to watch. Because they could have just made them adults. I've said that like 20 times by now, but there are really just so many shows where I'll sit there and watch it and I'm like, damn, this is a good show. And then it's like, but why are they kids?
As an American, that makes perfect sense to me. If you want to put these characters in raunchy situations, just make everyone adults. They already look like adults as far as I'm concerned, but it's important to remember that Japanese teenagers, especially those in upper middle and high school, are treated with a higher standard of maturity and agency. Considering sex is totally on their minds during that time, and we're biologically raring to go at that age, these depictions aren't considered all that outrageous. They look at this stuff and go, oh, those are some hot anime girls, and so should we, because they're just cartoons.
And that's just my main thing I don't like about anime. It's not like I'm over here, slapping a Bible and saying we gotta ban anime because think of the kids or whatever, but it is weird. Like, it is just kind of embarrassing.
True, it is embarrassing, depending on the audience, at least from a Western perspective, because Westerners aren't used to it. It's different. I certainly don't think the West needs to start lowering the age of consent or anything like that. That would be insane. With the way the US functions and raises youth, it's no wonder we look at teens and treat them like kids. Oddly enough, though, we're also way quicker to hand out weapons and driver's licenses. Getting a license in Japan takes a lot more education and formal steps than it does in the US. Thankfully, most Japanese students don't need to drive, and Japan actually has reliable public transit. That means, in terms of safety, America has it ass backwards. The US has 15 and 16-year-olds driving metal death machines all around, while Japan has some animated teens who look like full-on adults getting hanky-panky. Different societies have different needs, and thankfully anime is the sort of thing that we can enjoy in a safe space where those cultural differences can be understood in their proper context.
Yeah, I just wanted to toss this out there. It's not like I'm canceling my Crunchyroll subscription, I'm burning my manga and destroying my anime Blu-rays or anything like that. I'm still gonna keep watching anime.
At the end of the day, I just want to offer a second opinion, or at least a more elaborate exploration of this stuff. Millions of viewers are going to be watching his video and will take his words as gospel, but it's always important to understand things as shades of gray and not just black or white. Lastly, he has absolutely no obligation to like this stuff, and I'm glad he's pretty darn chill considering the topic. I just tend to look at the kinds of things he's taken issue with and realize that it doesn't have to be morally correct to be engaging, so long as you do what I always say and let fiction be fiction. But what do you guys think? Not just about this specific anime topic, but also what you think about major media influencers and how they shift public opinion. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Before I go ahead and roll the credits, I want to give a special shout out to my $10 supporters. Video Gamer 75, Stephen Elak, Otaku Mom, Jens Ballman, Mystic Samurai 1983, Freebrick, RNG or Shuffles 1498, Crod, Alexis Yukio Gomez Yamato, Nigel, Happy, Sakura-chan, Caitlin P, and SF Giants fan Mike. Thank you all so much. Thanks for watching.
If you enjoy this channel, help us grow by liking, commenting, sharing the video, subscribing to OtakuDaiKun, and
most of all, smashing that notification bell so you don't miss out on all of our anime discussion, lore, or Let's Play content.
You can support us directly through Patreon, Subscribestar, or our YouTube membership, all of which come with benefits like exclusive vids and early access.
As always,
Celebrate your fandom!